Okay, recap of the Common Council meeting of Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. And we are with the City Administrator Steve Barg and Marshfield Mayor Bob McManus. I'm Mike Warren from WDLB Radio. Chris Leonard from Hub City Times is with us as well. So Mayor, I want to start with something on the, it was on the agenda from the meeting that talked about, well, let's see here. Presentation, Street Division Space Needs Report. It was quite an involved report, presentation by Norman Barrientos of Barrientos Design and Consulting. Can you just kind of summarize what you heard in that report? And now it says, I believe it says none for information only, so no recommended action on this. But what was the report that you heard? And I guess, where do we go from here?
Well, it was a very, very thorough report. And the Board of Public Works, Dan Connect and the folks over at Streets requested a space study to see if we have enough room in our current buildings at the current location. If we have enough room there, because when you go over there, they're kind of all over each other and you got different types of equipment, more sensitive equipment. So do we have enough room in our current spot? And so they did a space needs study. And he just did about a 30-minute presentation and there was no stone unturned. It was a very, very thorough one. We had 5 different options, anywhere from, I think, around 11 million up to 16 million. And whatnot. And so what this does is we don't have anything in the immediate future where we look to do this, but certainly what you have to do is you have to plan for down the road. As you're aware, we just got through doing our CIP program, and that's just a 5-year plan. So where this will go is going to depend now, going back to Board of Public Works, and then discussions with the council, discussion with Streets. So it is a ways off, but we really know what we really need to do. Ultimately, what came out of it is their recommendation was to get a 10-acre parcel to be able to build the structure so you've got great flow of vehicles, loading, unloading, putting the right vehicles in the right garage and whatnot. So that's a tough one. It's 16 million and then plus acquiring land. But it at least gives us a starting point to have discussions. So overall, I thought their report was very good. I'm glad we have it. And it's going to lead to a lot of good discussions of what may be done down the road.
I would agree with what the mayor said, and I think he did a very good job. And it was very thorough. There's a 102-page document. If anybody wants to see it, they can certainly ask for it at City Hall. There's a link we can send you that goes through everything that talks about the vehicle needs, the office administrative needs, storage needs, everything. And some people from the council might look at it and say, or the public might say, where are we going to find this $13 million? That wasn't the consultant's responsibility. He was commissioned to say, okay, look at what we have, look at what we need, where we're going, what are the expectations in the years to come, and give us your best shot. And then he can walk away and say, I've given you the information that you need. Now, before people start thinking we're going to build a new public works garage on another site, or we're going to do a major improvement to the current one, I hope they realize that, we kind of queue these up over time. We've done a lot of things in the last 12 or 13 years in the city with the fire station, library, other things. Right now, the big project is the Aquatic Center, which we're all excited about to have online next June. But the one right behind it, don't forget, is the police department. And the council and the mayor has shown support for an expansion and remodeling on site. So, if we start looking out, what's our next improvement in the next, 4 or 5 years or so, it would be the PD before it would be Streets. But even if you're only, looking out a decade or so, the library was in the works for, I understand, like 20 years that was in the planning stages. So you have to get ready for that day. One of the interesting opportunities it does bring up, though, is people over time have said, why do you have a public works garage in your downtown? You got a street building with outside storage of snowplows and big trucks and stuff. Yeah, that's not ideal. So as part of giving us ideas as to how to expand and renovate on site, he did give us an idea about the site size and what it would take to have a much nicer facility someday in another location if we can make it work out. And that's something to put in the planning hopper along with ideas for, what we might want to do to the northwest part of downtown.
Do you have you even started looking at alternate sites?
No, not at this point, because we just literally got this report. And so there's nothing in the works right now. This is a discussion point. And so we know, I think there's 4 or 5 different options of what layouts, if you will, of what we could do in the current site. And he did a great job going very methodically through each one so that you could see what the options would be, putting different storages in different areas and whatnot, and how that would affect the price of what you do. And then ultimately he brought up, as Steve said, do you really want to have this facility right in the middle of your downtown? So that's where they say, if you are going to move and if you are going to take a look at things, then we would suggest finding a nice 10-acre spot, preferably on a corner, so that vehicles can come in and go out. So again, as Steve said, this is all for planning purposes and many discussions down the road. So there's nothing imminent. We're not looking for any other property or anything like this. The whole reason they put this together is so those discussions can start.
So, Steve, I'm guessing this is something that's not even in the CIP yet or any plan anywhere.
That's right, Mike. There's nothing budgeted for this or even put on the CIP, which is more of a blueprint document looking forward for the next 5 years. I do think it'll rekindle some conversations about the 2nd Street corridor going west of Chestnut. You remember we decided to kind of put that on hold because, we don't have, we have some obstacles if we're going to try and continue the 2nd Street corridor project out to Miller Park. And that includes the Public Works Garage. Weinbrenner's, still leasing from the city. They're looking at their options for what they want to do in the future. Hopefully they will stay with the city somewhere for a long time. And we acquired the Baltus Tire parcel, I think you realize. So at some point, I think people are going to start saying, is it going to make us consider again what might be possible for redevelopment in that part of downtown? But it's all too far in advance. This is really, square one type stuff in terms of where things may lead.
Okay. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Mayor, there was also a presentation on something that doesn't, really translate all that well to, I guess, the layperson out there. The average citizen doesn't know what, tax incremental financing is or what a tax incremental district is. I guess, though, when you boil it all down, as it translates to maybe the average citizen, it means what? It means if you have TIDs, you've got economic development going on, you've got a great tool that cities can use to, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but, it sort of takes some of that financial burden away from taxpayers and still helps the city get things done. And there was a nice report on those tax incremental districts by Ron Allman the other night, too.
Yeah, it was really good. And as typical with Ron Allman, very thorough. And Ron has done a great job. And one thing we did when we found the budget shortfall quite a while ago is we did ask that we'd like to get to, maybe quarterly or maybe every half year, get an update on them. And if you go through and you look, you could see that all of our tax increment districts are really doing well. And there's a couple of great things in there. Number one, obviously, it's going to help us fiscally that these are doing so well. There are some that are doing better than others. And so they can then what's called a donor TID, and they could kind of help the other one to get well. But really, this is a big compliment, I think. What I was getting out of this presentation the other night is this is a great compliment to all the people over the past years that have put together these TIDs to show the due diligence that went involved and the planning that went involved to have TIDs and TIFs that are doing well. You will notice that in many cities, there are the TID districts that simply don't do well. Yeah. And all of ours are doing well. And I would say that is a huge compliment to all the people over the past years, decades that have, probably not decades, but over a decade old, that that have put these together and everything else. So overall, our TID districts are doing very, very well. And that's some of them even possibly, there could be discussions of closing them early. They're doing so well. So overall, the presentation from Ron was excellent.
Yeah, I would agree. I grew up in central Minnesota. My dad was a city council member and a county commissioner in my home community, and he thought that TIF was just this horrific thing that, like a magician's bait and switch kind of thing. And it is true, communities have used their TIF districts for purposes that were not good, and they made investments that were not wise. That has not been the case here, and I think if you look at that last page, the recap page of what Ron handed out, you'll see that all the TIF districts are doing well here. Some are likely to close out sooner than others. You look at TIF district number 4, our downtown TIF district, which is probably not going to close out until near the end of its time, but that's because we use some of those monies for some great purposes, including redoing Chestnut and Maple, where we could use other people's money in part, the funds that come to us from, the county school and tech college as part of this deal in order to make improvements that we would have had to do a few years later anyway. So those were very wise decisions. And you look at the investments that have been brought, look at prevention genetics, dental crafters, the big one recently with PCA, and the amount of value that these have produced to the city, it's really pretty impressive. So, they're doing well. We had a call last year with Moody's when they were looking at our ratings, and the person from Moody's said, well, it looks like your TIF districts aren't performing well. And Ron and I kind of objected to that. I know what she was looking at the time from a factual level on a certain piece of paper, but you can't possibly look at the reports of how our districts are doing and say that they're not performing well. They're performing very well. There was the issue that I think the mayor just alluded to that we had to deal with a year and a half ago about how the monies were being shared between the general fund and the TIF districts that maybe have skewed things. But there's no way in the world you can look at this document and say that the 7 active TIF districts are not performing well, because they literally are.
And, one thing I really want to add to that is that there is a lot of work that goes behind putting together a TID district for a TIF, a lot of work, a lot of background work. You take a look at a company, can a company or companies, will they be able to make it there? And I just can't even begin to tell you how much background work goes into it. They don't just appear, and they don't just automatically do well. And this I believe that this just shows how government really, really can work in a very positive fashion. The other thing is Steve went back to is that the monies that got, that weren't handled necessarily properly coming over. I don't think that ever really needed to take place, and clearly it didn't, because everything has been performing so well. But we are where we are now, and we're digging our way out. But the TID districts themselves are doing incredible.
And I want to throw out one more shout out to the mayor and to the council. A year and a half ago, faced with some difficult information about those TIF district transfers, and they handle it very well. We brought on a new financial advisor in Ellers that's been great to work with. They've been rolling up their sleeves along with Ron Ullman, our finance director, who's done a marvelous job. So I want to give a kudos to everybody involved. We're in a much better place than we were a year and a half ago. But again, even when things didn't look great back in early 19 and we were struggling with those issues, it wasn't because the districts were underperforming. It's not that the investments made weren't wise. They always were. We landed some really good companies and kept some other companies here that were potentially, looking to go somewhere else. And we were able to help them expand and stay here in Marshfield.
I see in the presentation for TIF district number 10, including the mall, potential for mall redevelopment. There's been some talk over the last couple of years, people interested in coming in and doing something with it. Is there still talk there? And if not, what would you like to see happen?
Josh Miller, our development services director, keeps regular tabs with the mall ownership. And, retail has been a very difficult thing in the last couple of years. More and more stores are going to a lesser footprint. Even if you look at Kohl's, I know Kohl's is doing really well here, but I know when it first came here, people said, I thought it was going to be bigger than that. Well, even the stores that are building are looking at smaller footprints less brick and mortar. And, but there's been some challenges in retail. There's been some discussions between the mall ownership and some potential. We kind of call them mid-level not realtors, mid-level, retail. Thank you. It's not that hard a word. When you start thinking realtor, then you get hung up.
Right.
Mid-level retail type of outfits, and those I think are still going on. Hopefully, one of those will take, and if it does, probably other things will build in at the mall with smaller stores coming online. The thing for TIF District number 10, and you probably noticed it if you heard Ron's presentation or looked at the materials, because it covers a broader area than just the mall, there are other revenues coming in to make some of the debt payments that have been incurred, and that district is really hanging in there quite well. But we do want to see more retail growth in the mall. That's important to us. But I think, and maybe Bob will say this when I'm done, if you look at other malls around the country, other malls are in many cases not even open. You look at Wausau, look at other cities. So we're still hanging in there, and we have hopes of it growing to rebound to a place more like what it was in the past.
Retail is definitely changing. We don't know where it's going to go, but the talks have remained good. But it is certainly something that I think everybody is seeing. And then now that you have the COVID effect, I think you actually have more people buying online. So we're very interested to see what the developers there at the mall choose to come up with. And it's just a wait and see at this point.
Yeah, we keep holding out our hand and talking to them, but we can't drive them to do anything. We just want them to know we're here. The council has shown a willingness to work with them if they can bring some prospects online. And, we're hopeful that something will take hold.
Could you just tell us why TIFs are important, the role they play, and what that means for taxpayers? Am I right in saying that, boy, if we didn't get some of this stuff done, I don't know, through TIFs, how would it get done? Would there be an extra added burden on the city in terms of maybe having to increase, a tax rate or something like that? Or maybe just give us a sort of a brief lesson on them, what they are and why they're important and how they're used by the city.
I'll give you a brief one, and then Steve can take over. It's really vital as a development tool for the city. If you look at a PCA for a company like that to come in, and we were able to really help them out in the TIF district, that really helps because that brings a lot of jobs to Marshfield. And that's where, if you look at many of our different TIF districts, the result from that is very, very good jobs. And many of those people do live here in Marshfield. Many of those businesses, you can imagine with PCA, I believe over 100 employees, and stopping for gas, going to the grocery store, going out to get a hamburger, all of that business and economic development for the city is very, very good. And when those tools are used properly, it helps everything. And now, so when a business would come in, or businesses, some TIF districts are, let's go out and create a district and put it there and build it and they will come. There are less of those nowadays because what we know for sure, Josh Miller came back, our development services director, and specific site TIFs are really kind of where things are going. So overall, it's a great economic development tool. But again, you really have to look at everything involved. So they're very, very good for economic development.
When the mayor came here 2.5 years ago, he brought a good business sense with him, and that's important. When people come in from the outside, oftentimes they say, we've got to run government more like a business. You have to remember there's two aspects to what we do here. There's the government side that isn't like a business. I mean, we have meetings, we have to have second readings of ordinances, we have to publish things in the newspaper. Sometimes people say, why does it move so slowly? Well, a lot of that is government process to give the public a chance to weigh in. But the business side, and that's really what TIF districts are, is you're acting like a business. You're actually looking at it, and a company says, look, if you can extend the rail and you can provide us some connections to some utilities, maybe provide a financial incentive of this dollar amount, let's say $200,000, we will do this. We'll bring 75 jobs. They're going to pay roughly $20, on average. The building we're putting up is going to have, I'm just making this up, but it's going to have, let's say, $5 million value. And you calculate what that's going to be in terms of tax revenue ultimately. And then you make a business decision. And I think the city of Marshfield over the years, and this goes back before I came here, I'm not tooting my own horn, but we've done some good deals in the last 9 years. But they did some good deals before that, where they honestly looked at it and said, okay, based upon what we're getting, we would be able to do X. And if the company says, well, they're offering more in Point and Rapids and Wausau, well, maybe there's a point where we can't compete. We just can't give up the amount of resources to try and land that business in Marshfield. But if we make a good business decision and we can recruit and keep quality employers, jobs, as the mayor said, is spending money on restaurants, stores, gas stations, being part of our community, it's a great thing. And I think the public expects us to do that. They may sometimes read a headline that says the city provided $250,000 towards some project and think, are you kidding me? $250,000? But if they think about it, and if they were to see what we see and the long-term effects in terms of jobs and tax base and other economic benefits, I think in most cases they would make the same decisions. And that's what our mayor and council and our economic development board at times as well, they're involved. That's what they do.
And you look at these TIFs, at least I do, and I think most people do realistically. If you have, let's say, a $10 million project, and the developer is asking for $1 million or something like that, when they're putting in 90% of it, you're really going to look at it. You take a look at a different development where the whole development is going to be, say, $5 million, and they're asking for $5 million. That's probably not going to get the same attention. And there are some, we don't have any like that here, but certainly in some areas of the country, that's not uncommon.
We do get those kind of requests from time to time where you look at it and you realize that they're putting in less equity than they're asking us to do. And, we're not likely to pursue those. We may come back with a counter to them and say, look, we could maybe do 10% or something if you can make the rest work. But these are all business decisions, and we count on the staff, but also the mayor and council to make wise decisions based upon the information, the spreadsheets, the assessment of what we're getting for what we're giving.
Okay, I'll move on to another agenda item that did not really get a lot of attention or discussion at all. Discuss possible ordinance to allow chickens within the city of Marshfield. It was presented by Tom Budke. Mayor, how did this come about on the agenda? And maybe just to recap what happened at the meeting, or I should say what didn't happen at the meeting on this one.
When you get to know Tom Budke, I think that says it all. He's a great alderman, and a lot of people in his district, and he states, want to have chickens. It's something, I believe he's been an alderman for 18 years.
Yeah, 18, 20.
And he's been a great public servant, and he's out and about all the time, and the people that talk to him, apparently they want to have chickens. And so we did bring forward, I guess, other places like Wausau, Rapids, and whatnot, and they apparently have chicken ordinances to take a look at. And it looked like, based on the packet that was there the other night, that at one time it was entertained here.
Yep.
And I think that Alderman Budke was looking to get a little bit more of a response from his fellow aldermen, and there really wasn't much of one. So I think they're going to continue the discussion. Our ordinance officer was here, talked a little bit about it, and so where it goes from there, I really don't know. They'll probably bring it back, maybe request a vote at that time. But at least the other night, I just wasn't getting the flavor that other aldermen were interested in going there. That does not mean that we won't eventually have it, but it just didn't seem as though people were picking up on that. And what's interesting is there are some people that really want chickens. You go out and get backyard and get your fresh eggs and whatnot, and apparently there's other people that don't. So right now it's in Alderman Budke's hand to see where he takes it.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see staff do any more work unless they're directed by the body. I mean, we're certainly not going to start working on another ordinance or pulling more information together without the council directing us. We've got enough things to do every day when we come into the office. So we'll see if Tom brings it back or if somebody else wants to take it up. It's interesting though, and I know that the mayor's been part of this in the past. We have third graders every year who come in for tours. It's different now than it used to be in the old city hall where you had multiple floors, but we bring them in this room. We have the city engineer, the city clerk, and others come and talk to them about what they do. It's a good lesson for the 8 and 9-year-olds to hear about government. But as part of it, we do a mock council meeting. And, every year we have a couple of issues. We have the kids come up here and they pretend that they're the council and the mayor and other officials. And one of the scenarios I've used before, and I think you were part of it one time, is the chicken ordinance. And it's funny how even among like 9-year-olds, it's divided. There's some who would make comments right from up here. They say, well, I think it's great. Why can't you have chickens? What's it going to bother your neighbor if you have them in a little coop and you clean up after them so it doesn't smell? And then the next one will raise his hand and say, I think that's meant for farms. I mean, if you want chickens, you should be out in the country. So that is the kind of thing that a lot of cities have gone through in Wisconsin, and they've come to different conclusions. There are several cities that have adopted them. Others have rejected them. Those who've rejected them, I think, maybe have cited the slippery slope thing. Today it's chickens. Is somebody going to want other kinds of farm animals in the future? But the supporters would say, no, don't make this bigger than it is. I want to have 3 or 4 chickens in a little coop next to my garage. That's all I'm talking about. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it's brought back at this point, although Tom Bikey didn't get a lot of support for it, at least audibly, the other night. But, there are communities who've done it. They've done it as a licensing thing more than a zoning thing, where they just have very strict limits, kind of like dogs and cats, where you can have up to this many, but here's the rules for keeping them, and you have to have an annual license. I guess we'll see if it ever rises to the level that the council wants to take it up seriously. I was new in 2011 when they voted 6-3 against the ordinance that the mayor referred to, and that was after a lot of debate. They just didn't get over the hump in terms of thinking it was a good idea then, but who knows in the future.
Okay, anything else on that one? No? Okay. All right. There was also an item, it says here, request to authorize mayor to appoint council members to the city negotiating team for collective bargaining with the police union. Mayor, can you address that one? What is the negotiating team, and what was the action, if any, taken at the meeting?
So this is the normal negotiating team that the city puts together when we meet with the there's a separate one. We had a separate one a while ago with the fire department union, and now we need to meet with the police union. And so they have the police union has their team, and then the city has their team, if you will, of folks that get together. And so we brought it to the council because normally, in these things, our alder people are already stretched. Not only do they come to their every other Tuesday meetings, and there's a lot of decision that takes place, and a lot of people look at a meeting that lasts 2 hours and go, yeah, it's no big deal. But boy, when you look at the hours of preparation that go into it, it's a lot. And then they've each of them are on either finance, budget, and personnel or public works. Along with that duty, there's some of them are on 2 other committees, some maybe 3 to 4. So it's a lot. So in the past, Steve tells me that when they've put together these negotiating teams, there's only, they actually they always put it out there. Does anybody want to be on it? Do any of the older people want to be on it? And typically it's no or maybe one, and then they have to go back and get them. Well, this time we had 4 people. And all 4 would be perfectly fine to be on the negotiating team. So it's kind of like, okay, so the mayor can either appoint them or they can vote amongst themselves what they want to do. The point is we needed to get 2 people on the team. So how they get there is kind of irrelevant, I think. And so Mr. Butke made a motion to put Alderperson Spiros and Alderperson Wagner on there, and that got approved, and they'll do just fine. Any 4 of them would have been fine.
Yeah, I've been here for 9+ years now, and I've sent this email out before, and usually it's like crickets. You just don't hear anything because people are busy, as the mayor said. And this time I sent it out, and I'm doing other work at my desk, and hey, somebody volunteered. That's great. I go do some other things. Somebody else volunteered. We're done. Not too long after that, somebody else volunteered. 4 people responding to the email saying, I'd very much like to be on that committee and that team, and we've never had that before. So some of the discussion behind the scenes involving the city attorney, at the end, it's kind of semantics. We tried to figure out whether or not it's a special committee where the mayor makes the appointment, subject to the council approval, or if it's something outside of that where it should start with the council deciding who their 2 representatives are. At the end of the day, even if we'd done it the other way, if the mayor had made his appointments, the council still could have said no, and they could have made a suggestion of their own or forced the mayor to come back with other ideas. So that's really not a big deal. I think what's really good, and I think it's what Bob is saying, is we have people interested. And that's great. I mean, people willing to spend and volunteer their time to get a good contract with our law enforcement personnel. That's really positive to see. We're not begging, I'm not bribing them with pizza or something. We've had pizza at our lunches before, but that's not usually going to get people to come out and spend 4 hours in a bargaining session. So it's good, and now we'll start meeting with the PD. It'll be a new contract effective 1/1/21, and probably be for 3 years. And there's always challenges. We've got the financial issues we do. There's other issues that come up in the process about whether it be uniform allowances or other terms of the contract. And we've always had a very good relationship with both our fire and police unions. So I look forward to the process.
Any thought given to why maybe the sudden interest in the negotiating team?
No, it's very interesting. I have a lot of respect for all 10 alder people, and everyone has varying opinions and whatnot. So to answer your question directly, I really have no idea why there was the interest, because it's not like these negotiations. I mean, when we met last year to do the fire department thing, that went over a series of 9 months, I think. I mean, it was a lot. And these are not short meetings where you go in for 30 minutes and everyone adjourns. Some of these meetings were 4, 5, 6 hours, taking breaks and whatnot. So what their motivation is to do it, I know that we have a lot of, it's a negotiation, and a lot of it gets down to incomes, as far as will there be raises, what percentage, blah, all of that stuff. And I know that all 10 of the alder people are very concerned with the finances coming into, because we know coming into budgets, this is going to be a big issue. So I think there's more attention on it because of that.
Yeah, I don't think I could add much to that. I can't explain it any more than Bob did. I mean, every individual person may have had their own reason. Maybe one of them, for all I know, is looked at this in the past and said, well, we don't get to see it until closer to the end. I'd like to be part of it in the development stage. But without talking to them, I really wouldn't know specifically.
Okay, anything else on that one?
I don't think so.
Okay, there was a closed session item I noticed on, it said review of potential legal claims arising out of the police department. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, we really can't. There was no motion made in open session. And sometimes, even if there's not a motion in open session, I can touch on the item at a really high level, but there's really not anything I can report at this time, Mike.
Okay. Also, I did have a memo here from Steve on, let's see, resume imposing late fees on sanitary sewer bills. Was that something that was approved by the council?
Yeah, that was under the consent agenda. And I thought that might be noteworthy to point out today to our listeners and viewers, because, when COVID-19 struck, we were all trying to figure out what can we do to help the public who was going to be hurting. And at that time, we didn't realize that there might be a lot of furloughs and, layoffs or businesses hurting. But we learned that pretty quickly that people were going to struggle. So in April, the mayor and council took a good step and followed the PSC and Marshfield Utilities lead. They were already doing the termination, or suspending, I should say, of late fees on electric and water bills. Well, we went ahead and did the same thing for sanitary sewer. And it seems like a small thing, late fees on a sanitary sewer bill, but we wanted to do what we could to give relief to our citizens and let them know that we care. So then people might be looking at this and saying, well, the pandemic's not over. Why are you going back to putting these late fees on these bills? The pandemic continues, and the mayor gives some great updates on that from time to time. I'm glad he does that. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have safer at home anymore. Business activity has resumed. Some of the things have gone a little bit more back toward normal. So the PSC in Madison decided to have the electric and water utilities resume late fees on those delinquent accounts. We felt it was appropriate to do the same at the sanitary sewer level, kind of combining and being one with Marshfield Utilities. So, I mean, if we start getting more cases, if we start getting more, a surge type thing happening, we may all end up in the same boat again. But right now we felt this was appropriate.
Is the city or the utilities informing the public somehow that these are resuming?
Well, I don't know that we've done anything yet. We have a communications director, and I haven't talked to him since Tuesday night. I think we probably should be. Maybe he's already planning on doing some sort of a piece to get out to the various media outlets and the city's platforms, Facebook and the website and other places to let people know that. I haven't really discussed that with him since Tuesday night. That's a good point, though.
Okay. Now, we've, a lot of this stuff we mentioned, COVID-19, the pandemic comes up. Any updates, Mayor, from the city on, I know you give periodic updates on, how the city's handling it, what, cases or updates from the health department to the health officials here, any kind of update there that you want to give us?
Well, I did an update at the council meeting on the numbers there, and I'm very optimistic about it. And also today, and we've talked about this many times before, but Steve and I, fire department, police department, the Wood County Health, Marshfield Clinic Health Systems, both school systems, university system, Mackey, the YMCA, there's a group of about 23 of city leaders that communicate every Thursday. We'll have our meeting today at 2:00. And we're really making sure that frontline communication is wide open with what is going on. We see the cases that continue to grow. The amount of cases, what's very interesting is the amount of people going into the hospital is remaining the same. I believe as of this morning, there was a total of 320 people that were in the hospital throughout the state. And of that, and I think there was 111 that were in the ICU. Now that's to the whole state. Just in the North Central region, I believe it was at 26 people in the hospital. Now, if you bring it down to Wood County, and Wood County, if you want the national or the state statistics, and there you go to Wisconsin Department of Health, and they are phenomenal. They do it every day at 2:00. They update all of the cases and everything, so that's good. If you bring it to the local area, to Wood County, and we've seen our Wood County, when I did an update about a month ago, our infection rate was at about 1.9, and it's up to 3.37. And we see that there is a big problem down to our friends in the South County area where cases have really gone up. And it seems like they're getting a good handle on it now. But if you bring it here to Marshfield, if you go to Wood County, again, it shows you the daily, the amount of daily folks that get the virus, how many go into the hospital and whatnot. And it also goes by age group, municipality, and everything else. And when you go to the city of Marshfield, as of yesterday, has had a total of 51 cases. And of that, if you look on their site, it's currently saying that between 1 and 5 are active. Now, that number has remained the same for about the last 7 to 8 days. We're very encouraged by that. If you open it up to school district, the Marshfield School District I believe last I looked, there was a total of 71 folks that have contracted the virus. And of the 71, a total of 1 to 5 active viruses in there. Does that mean there's 1 or does that mean there's 5? That part we don't know. But when you take a look, when you open it up from the city of Marshfield to the Marshfield School District, but you've got the same amount of actives, that's very encouraging for us. So we are just so proud of the people of the city of Marshfield and the surrounding school district. There is a mask mandate in there. Both Steve and I right now, we are not wearing our masks, but we've got them right here. We're doing this to make sure that audio goes well, but the mask mandate is out there. I am going to ask that if somebody is not wearing a mask, that we don't go up and shame the people or anything like that. There are some people that can't wear the masks for a variety of different reasons. But I will say, most of the time when you go into festival or whatnot, most people are wearing masks. Yeah. But always remember there's some great things. If you cough or sneeze, make sure you cover your mouth if you're not wearing a mask. Wash your hands. Wash them a lot throughout the day. If you're sick, stay home. And if your kids are sick, stay home. And it would probably be good to avoid large gatherings. You know, we see in the state, if you go to Wood County, I will tell you what, the huge growth in coronavirus is between 20 to 29 and 30 to 39. It's just off the charts, and then it goes way down from there. So overall, we're optimistic, but we're not through this yet. So we just have to stay vigilant and hope for the best.
It seems like a lifetime ago now, in mid-March, that the mayor and I and others were called to a meeting at the police department. You know, we just had, I think while we were in the meeting, we found out the first case in Wood County had happened. And there weren't many cases in Wisconsin yet. They were just starting to break. So it's been a long 5-month period. But I think, and I'm going to give you kudos, Bob. You've done a great job in terms of your public announcements, the PSAs, the reports, balancing this idea of we want the public to take this very seriously, but we don't want them to be panicky or, you know, living in fear. You've done a great job of that. You really have. That's the balance that we have to try and find as public officials, because there's people on all ends of the spectrum. Even as we do this, you know, meeting with you guys right now, there's people who are just deathly afraid and don't want to step outside their house. And there's others who don't believe that this is even a real problem and they think it's been totally almost manufactured. And neither of those are true, you know, to the best of my understanding. So finding that balance to make people aware, take precautions for yourself and others, but don't live in fear is an important balance. And I think you've done a good job of striking it. I think others in this community have as well. And I think the community has responded. Those early weeks of our meetings that he's talking about, and when all these community leaders talking about what can we do to help deal with the health issues, but also the social service issues, the human service issues, things like, is there food, you know, for the families that are hurting? All those things came together, and the response of this community in those initial weeks that was so critical went very well, in my opinion.
One thing I will say about that, I think the reporting that you both have done on this through the time has been excellent. And I will tell you, I'm thrilled over that. And Mike, I listened to your updates when you give updates on WDLB. And I will tell you this, what I like about it is you just give the facts and you don't give you should think this way, you should think that way. Here's what they are. And I think that really helps with people not getting too upset and whatnot. We have to be vigilant. We can't let down now. But at the same time, let's just get the facts.
But I also do agree with what you said earlier, too, about the hospitalizations and the fatalities. I mean, those are moving in the right direction for us. Doesn't mean we should get overconfident, but it does suggest that maybe we're in the right trend.
Okay, anything else? All right. Well, I want to thank Marshfield Mayor Bob McManus and City Administrator Steve Barg for joining us here, post-council breakdown, if you will, from the meeting on Tuesday, August 11th. And for Chris Leonard from Hub City Times, I'm Mike Warren from WDLB Radio, and thank you for listening in on our post-council breakdown here today.